How does student loan debt affect your credit score? That's a really hot topic for a lot of people, especially people who've been through difficult times with their credit blocking them from buying the home they wanted, buying the car they wanted, financing whatever dream purchase they wanted to make. And they don't have to hurt your credit really that bad at all. So that's really why I wanted to do today's video, so you could see that your credit score does not have to be hurt by your student loan debt. We're going to discuss 6 key topics on this video today. First, does decent credit even matter for student loan borrowers? Second, what is the impact of consolidation on your credit score? Third, what is the impact of refinancing on your credit score? Fourth, what's the impact of hard credit checks from refinancing or applying to refinance on credit score? 5, what are some other consolidation scenarios that could potentially hurt your credit? And finally, 6, should you consolidate or refinance with this knowledge? So first, let's talk about whether good credit actually matters for student loan borrowers. The reality is your credit doesn't need to be amazing, it just needs to be good enough. So if you wanted to get a lower interest rate on your student loan debt by moving your loans off the federal system to a private lender for a better interest rate, you're going to need at least a 650 to get anything decent. Some lenders might be willing to go lower than that, but a 650 credit score is really the minimum at most places. Now, that's just the minimum to get approved for something. If you want the very best deals they give out, you might need to have a credit score over 750 to get the absolute best deals. Sometimes once you have a really good credit score too, a lender will value other things more in determining what interest rate they're going to give you. Those things might include your profession, your debt to income ratio, your savings, and your other credit history that exists besides just your credit score. So the credit question, does it matter? Yes, it matters, but it only matters up to a point where you have at least a certain score, and then other things take priority. Second, does consolidation affect your credit score? If you mean consolidation with the federal system, the answer to that is no. Consolidation is something that's pretty straightforward. A lot of people do it, and all it is taking a bunch of different loans and putting it into a new loan. So consolidation really shouldn't affect your credit score too much. The only scenario that I can think of that even might come into play for affecting your credit score is sometimes the length of history of an account matters. And if you have really, really old loans that you've been making consistent payments on for a long time and you consolidate those, that might take away that credit history, so you might see a little bit of impact there. But for most people, that shouldn't really be a concern. Third, does refinancing affect your credit score? The answer is long-term, no, it really doesn't. Now, that comes with a caveat, obviously. Refinancing a loan, you're doing it because you're trying to get a lower interest rate. You're not doing it because you want to try to improve or worrying about decreasing your credit score, because it's not going to really make much of an impact at all. Number 4, do hard credit checks affect your credit score when you're applying to do a student loan refinance? So this is really what I want to talk about how refinancing your student loan debt could potentially affect your credit score, but not in a way that you should be worried about. So when you apply to refinance, you do pre-qualified rate checks, where it's not going to impact your credit at all because they're doing a soft pull of your credit to give an idea of whether or not they can give you a pre-qualified offer, which is non-binding. And that gives you an indicative answer as to what you might get if you went through the process with them. And if they show you a good pre-qualified offer, then you go through the process and you agree to a hard pull so they can truly verify you are who you say you are and your credit is what they think it is. So a hard credit check, a lot of people want to know, is that something that impacts me one time, or is that something that's going to hurt me with every company that I apply with? Because that's obviously a big concern for people, that they don't want to have 5 different hard credit checks hurting them. And the good news is, as long as you check all these places within a 30-day window, it's considered rate shopping, which means that you get hit once with a hard credit check no matter how many places you check, as long as it's within that 30-day window. And when we're talking about a 5 to 10 point impact in your credit, that's not going to make any difference at all for qualifying for most any financial product. The only exception could be if you fall slightly out of the very premium range of ultra low rates or something on a mortgage. Maybe for example, if they have only people above 750 get a mortgage and you have a 745 because you did a hard pull in your credit score 2 weeks before applying for a mortgage, well then maybe that could influence things, but it's really a rare situation. So what we tell people is, if you're making a mortgage or a mortgage refinance, probably make that the priority and focus on getting a rate deal on that first. And once you've confirmed that rate deal is locked in, then go ahead and refinance your student loans. And if you're not thinking about making a big purchase within a month or two, of doing a student loan refinance, then you should go ahead and do the student loan refinance, because a credit score is kind of like an axe that you use to chop down a tree. If you have an 850 and you don't use it at all, then what's the point of having a perfect credit score? Much like having an axe that's perfectly sharpened that never gets used to cut down a tree, which when it's used to cut down a tree, it's going to be a little bit more dull when you're finished with the process, but it can always be resharpened. That's a really good analogy for how your credit score is impacted by student loan debt. The point of the credit score is to have a good enough score to get the deals that you want to get, and just to know how to utilize student loans so that you don't negatively hurt your score really much at all. 5, what are some other consolidation scenarios that could potentially hurt your credit? So you should know that if your loans are in default or delinquency and you consolidate with a federal student loan, then that credit history stays with you from the old payments that you didn't make on time. You can do a rehabilitation instead, which most people after the pandemic would qualify for if they were in default or delinquency pre-pandemic. You can just simply say, I want to get back on my income-driven plan again, and that would be something you'd be able to do on a direct loan. So just know that the rehabilitation of a student loan is something that does not impact your credit, whereas consolidating a student loan that's in default or delinquency does have an impact on your credit because it doesn't erase what happened. In a few years, your payment history is going to not matter to your credit score anymore, even if you were in default or delinquency, as long as you get out of that status. But it's just something to know. Likewise, if you have a private student loan that's in default, a lot of times people will offer to consolidate that debt into a new loan, and that's something you really need to consult with an attorney about, because a lot of times the reason lenders want to do that is because they want to reset the clock on discharge of debt. Sometimes different states and localities have statute of limitations that creditors have to abide by, and if they don't get a judgment from a court within a certain window, then that debt's sort of written off the books and you don't even really owe it anymore. So there are some things that you need to consider that you might, in sort of these more niche cases, you might want to consult with a student loan attorney. And 6, should you consolidate or refinance given this knowledge of how it impacts your credit score? We actually have a great video for you next on that exact topic. So I hope you watch, and if you have any other questions, check out studentloanplanner.com.